They say the most dangerous men in the world carry guns. Valentino De Luca carried something far worse: the silence of his own children, 3 identical girls, 6 years old. Not a single word spoken in 2 years, not since the night their home became a battlefield and their mother's blood stained the marble floor. Therapists, specialists, even a renowned psychiatrist from Vienna, all failed. The De Luca fortune, built on fear and favors, couldn't buy back their voices. Then came a Thursday evening, an upscale restaurant called the Onyx Room, and a waitress who broke every rule in the service handbook. She didn't use therapy. She didn't use medicine. She used a fork and balsamic glaze on an empty plate. What happened next didn't just break the silence. It exposed a traitor, ignited a war, and brought the De Luca empire to the edge of collapse. This is the story of how 3 dots connected into a triangle saved a family, and how a waitress with student debt became the most dangerous woman in New York. Before we begin, kindly comment where in the world you are watching from. I'm responding to everyone. The Onyx Room didn't cater to regular people. It catered to the kind of people who made regular people nervous. It was 7:30 p.m. on a Thursday, and the restaurant was performing its usual theater of hushed elegance. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, so crisp they could cut. Waitstaff who moved like shadows. But tonight, even the shadows were afraid. Becca Angelo balanced 3 water glasses on a tray and tried to keep her hands from shaking. She was 26, drowning in student loan debt, and 1 bad shift away from eviction. A semester short of her special education degree, a dream she'd abandoned when the foster system took her younger brother and never gave him back. Now she served overpriced risotto to people who didn't look at her face. But invisibility became impossible when Valentino De Luca walked through the door. The restaurant manager, Philippe, actually stepped backward. The sommelier dropped a wine list. Even the kitchen went quiet, and Becca could hear it through the service window. The sudden absence of clattering pans. Valentino De Luca was a man built from marble and menace. Mid-30s, tailored charcoal suit that whispered money, and a neck tattoo that crawled up from his collar like smoke. His presence didn't fill the room. It crushed it. Behind him, 2 men in dark suits flanked the entrance. One had a scar through his eyebrow. The other kept his hand near his waist in a way that made Becca's stomach turn. But it wasn't the mobster or his bodyguards that made Becca freeze. It was the 3 little girls holding his hands. Triplets, 6 years old, identical in every terrifying way. They wore matching beige lace dresses with Peter Pan collars, their dark hair pulled into tight braids. Their faces were expressionless, not sad, not scared, just absent, like dolls arranged in a store window. "Table 12, Valentino said. His voice was low, controlled, and carried the kind of authority that didn't need volume. "The private alcove." Philippe nearly tripped over himself. "Of course, Mr. De Luca, right away. The chef will personally—" "Just seats and silence." The girls moved in perfect synchronization. 3 sets of polished shoes, 3 identical gazes fixed on nothing. They didn't look around. They didn't whisper to each other. They just existed. Becca watched from across the dining room as Philippe seated them. The bodyguards took positions, one near the kitchen entrance, one by the front door. The other diners suddenly found reasons to leave early. Within 10 minutes, the Onyx Room was empty, except for staff and the De Luca family. "Becca!" Philippa hissed, grabbing her elbow. His cologne was suffocating. "You're taking table 12. "What?" "Why me?" "Because Margot just quit, in the bathroom, texted her resignation." Philippa's eye twitched. "And because if I go over there again, I might have a heart attack. Just don't make eye contact. Don't ask questions. Bring water. Take the order. Smile. Disappear. Becca's heart hammered. Philippe, I really don't think you want your paycheck or not. She grabbed her notepad. Her hands were sweating. As she approached table 12, she could hear Valentino speaking. His voice had changed. Softer, pleading, almost unrecognizable from the command he'd given Philippe. Luna, Stella, Nova, please, just one bite. You have to eat something. The triplets sat in their chairs like 3 statues. Their hands were folded in their laps. Their eyes were fixed on the empty plates before them. Not a flicker. Not a blink. Valentino ran a hand through his dark hair, and for a moment, Becca saw something she didn't expect. Desperation. She stepped up to the table, cleared her throat gently. Good evening. My name is Becca, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. Can I start you with something to drink? Valentino's head snapped up. His eyes were dark, not black, but a brown so deep it swallowed light. He looked at her the way predators assessed threats. Water, he said, and 3 apple juices. No ice. Becca nodded, scribbling. And for dinner? They won't eat. She paused. I'm sorry? I said they won't eat. His jaw tightened. Bring me the grilled branzino. For them, he gestured at the girls. Chicken tenders. Plain. No sauce. Becca looked at the triplets. Their eyes were still locked on the empty plates. Something about the way they stared made her skin crawl. It wasn't defiance. It was something deeper. Darker. She recognized it. Years ago, in her clinical rotations, she'd worked with a boy who'd witnessed his father's overdose. He'd stopped speaking for 8 months. When he finally did, the first thing he said was, I didn't want to wake him up. These girls weren't silent because they couldn't speak. They were silent because speaking meant remembering. I'll put that in right away, Becca said softly. Valentino dismissed her with a wave. But as Becca turned to leave, she glanced back one more time and caught the girls staring directly at her. Not at their father, not at the table, at her. All 3, in perfect, eerie unison. And for just a second, Becca saw something flicker behind their eyes, a plea. The kitchen at the Onyx Room was a war zone of whispered panic. The line cooks moved like they were defusing bombs. The sous chef kept glancing at the security monitor that showed table 12, as if Valentino might somehow sense his fear through the camera. Becca pushed through the swinging doors with the tray balanced on her palm. 3 plates of untouched chicken tenders, 3 glasses of apple juice, each with exactly 2 sips missing. The girls had lifted the glasses in unison, drunk in perfect synchronization, then set them down at the exact same angle. It had been 40 minutes, and they still hadn't blinked out of rhythm. Valentino sat with his untouched branzino, cooling in front of him, his phone face down on the table. He wasn't looking at it. He was looking at his daughters with the kind of exhaustion that came from years of losing the same battle. Luna, he said quietly, reaching toward the closest girl. Please, just one piece. The triplet, Luna, apparently, didn't move. Her eyes remained fixed on her plate. The chicken tenders sat in a neat row, steam long gone, grease congealing. Becca approached with trained caution. She'd learned in her clinical work that you never startled a traumatized child. You made yourself small, predictable, safe. Would you like me to box these up for you? She asked gently. Valentino's jaw tightened. No, leave them. Maybe they'll... He stopped, shook his head. Just bring the check. Becca should have walked away, should have printed the bill, collected the inevitable massive tip, and forgotten this ever happened. But her eyes caught on something that made her pause. The peas. Each plate had a small side of roasted peas that no one had touched, and the girls, all three of them, had been moving them, not eating them, arranging them. Luna had pushed hers to the left edge of her plate. Stella had centered hers. Nova had pushed hers to the right. 3 separate dots, equidistant, deliberately placed. Becca's mind flashed back to her child psychology classes, pattern recognition, non-verbal communication, the way traumatized children created systems, codes, silent languages to feel control when everything else was chaos. Her hand moved before her brain could stop it. She set down her tray and picked up a clean fork from the table setting. Then, in one smooth motion, she reached across the table and dragged the tines through the balsamic reduction that had pooled on Luna's plate. One line, from Luna's pea to Stella's, another line, from Stella's to Nova's, a third line, connecting back to Luna's, a perfect triangle, 3 points, connected. The reaction was instant and terrifying. All 3 girls gasped, not separately, simultaneously, as if they shared one set of lungs. Their heads snapped toward the plate with mechanical precision. Connected, they whispered. The word came from 3 mouths at once, perfectly synchronized, and it hit the air like a thunderclap in the silent restaurant. Valentino's chair screeched backward. He was on his feet, hands braced on the table, staring at his daughters like they'd just risen from the dead. "What did you—" His voice cracked. "What did you just say?" The girls didn't answer. They were fixated on the triangle, their small fingers reaching out to trace the lines Becca had drawn in the sauce. "Connected," they whispered again, softer this time, almost reverent. Becca's hand was still holding the fork. Her heart was slamming against her ribs. She could feel the weight of Valentino's stare now, heavy and sharp. "What did you do?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. "I just—" Becca swallowed. "They were making a pattern. With the peas. I thought maybe— They haven't spoken in 2 years." Valentino's eyes were wild now, searching her face like she held the answer to a question he'd been asking in the dark. 2 years. Not one word. Not to doctors, not to therapists, not to me. The bodyguard by the kitchen, the one with the scar, was moving toward them now. Felipe had emerged from his office, pale as a ghost. But Becca couldn't look away from the girls. They were still tracing the triangle, still whispering that single word like a prayer. Connected. Valentino circled the table slowly, never taking his eyes off Becca. When he stopped, he was close enough that she could smell his cologne, cedar and smoke. "What's your name?" he asked. "Becca. Becca Angelo. And you're a waitress." "Yes." His eyes narrowed. "You're lying." Her breath caught. "I'm not. You did something no specialist could do in 2 years, in 30 seconds. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "So I'll ask you again. What are you?" Becca's mouth went dry. "I was studying child psychology before I dropped out." Valentino stared at her for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone, typed something, and pocketed it again. "You don't work here anymore," he said. "Excuse me?" "You work for me now." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. No name, just a phone number embossed in silver. "Be at this address tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. I can't just—" "Yes, you can." His voice was iron. "Because you just gave me something I thought I'd lost forever." He looked back at his daughters, and for the first time since he'd walked in, Valentino De Luca smiled. It was the saddest thing Becca had ever seen. Becca made it exactly 4 steps toward the kitchen before Valentino's hand closed around her wrist. Not rough, not violent, but absolute. "We're not done talking," he said. Felipe materialized beside them, his face a mask of terror, trying to impersonate professionalism. "Mr. De Luca, if there's been any issue with the service, I assure you, leave." Valentino didn't even look at him. Felipe vanished like smoke. Valentino guided Becca through the kitchen doors. The staff scattered immediately, abandoning half-plated dishes and simmering pans. Within seconds they were alone, among the stainless steel and steam. He released her wrist and leaned against the prep counter, arms crossed. The pose was casual, but everything about him radiated controlled danger. Like a blade resting in its sheath. "You're going to tell me everything," he said. "What you studied, where you trained, why you're slinging pasta instead of working with kids." Becca's back hit the walk-in freezer door. "I don't owe you my life story. No, but you owe me an explanation for what just happened out there." His eyes were locked on hers, unflinching. "My daughters haven't spoken since they watched men break into our home and put 3 bullets in their mother." 24 months of silence. Specialists from Johns Hopkins, a trauma therapist from Stockholm, even a goddamn child whisperer from California who charged me $50,000 to sit in a room and hum. Becca's stomach turned. "I'm sorry. I didn't know. And then you show up with a fork and balsamic vinegar. And suddenly they're talking." He pushed off the counter, closing the distance between them. "So, either you're a miracle worker, or you know something about my daughters that I don't. Which is it?" "Neither. I just—" Becca forced herself to breathe. They were making a pattern, 3 separate points. It looked like they were trying to communicate something, and when I connected them, they responded. "That's all." "That's all," Valentino repeated, his voice dripping with skepticism. "You read their minds with vegetables." "I read their behavior. It's basic developmental psychology. Traumatized children often create systems, patterns, ways to feel control. They were showing you something, and you weren't seeing it." His jaw tightened. "Watch your tone. You asked for an explanation. I'm giving you one." Becca's fear was still there. Sharp and cold, but something else was rising alongside it. Anger. Those girls out there are drowning, and everyone around them is treating them like broken dolls. They're not broken. They're locked inside themselves because the outside world isn't safe. Valentino stared at her for a long moment. Then, impossibly, he laughed. It was a harsh, bitter sound. "You've got spine, I'll give you that." He pulled out his phone, typed something, and turned the screen toward her. "That's your student loan balance, isn't it? $73,412. Becca's blood went cold. "How did you—" "I know everything, Miss Angelo. Your abandoned degree. Your brother in the foster system, who died in a car accident 3 years ago. The complaint you filed against a principal that got you blacklisted from teaching in New York." He pocketed the phone. "You wanted to save kids, and the system crushed you for it." Her hands were shaking now. "What do you want?" "I want you to work for me. Live in governess, full-time. Your only job is to get my daughters to speak in complete sentences." "That's not how trauma therapy works. You can't just— I'll pay off your loans, all of them. 73,000 cleared by tomorrow morning." He stepped closer. "And I'll get your teaching certification restored. I know people on the licensing board. People who owe me favors." Becca's breath caught. "That's illegal." "Yes." "You're bribing me." "Yes." "And if I say no?" Valentino's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Not a threat. Something worse. Desperation. Then I'll find someone else who says yes. But they won't be you. And my daughters responded to you. His voice dropped. I've spent 2 years watching them disappear a little more every day. I'll do anything to bring them back. Anything. Becca looked past him toward the kitchen doors. She could see table 12 through the circular window. The triplets were still tracing the triangle on the plate, their movements synchronized, hypnotic. She thought about her student loans, the eviction notice taped to her apartment door, the teaching career she'd lost trying to protect a kid from his abusive father. She thought about her brother, the way his foster parents hadn't noticed he'd stopped eating until it was too late. I need to know something first, Becca said quietly. Those men who broke into your home. The ones who killed their mother. Did you find them? Valentino's face went cold and hard. Yes. And? They're not a problem anymore. Becca closed her eyes. When she opened them, she'd made her decision. I'll do it. But I have conditions. Name them. I control their schedule, their therapy, their environment. You don't override me, you don't question my methods, and you don't bring your work around them. Ever. Done. And when I get them talking again, she met his eyes, you let me go. No strings, no favors owed. Valentino extended his hand. Deal. Becca shook it. His grip was warm, firm, and made her feel like she'd just signed her soul away. One more thing, he said. Pack a bag tonight. A car will pick you up at 6 a.m. Tomorrow? That's... My daughters just spoke for the first time in 2 years, Miss Angelo. I'm not waiting. He walked out of the kitchen, leaving Becca alone with the cooling pans and the weight of what she'd just agreed to. Through the window, she watched him return to table 12 and crouch beside his daughters. They didn't look at him, but their hands, all 6 of them, reached out simultaneously to touch the triangle on the plate. Connected. Becca pressed her palm against the freezer door, letting the cold seep through her skin. What the hell had she just done? The De Luca estate wasn't a home. It was a fortress disguised as a museum. The black Mercedes had picked Becca up at exactly 6 a.m., driven by a man who didn't speak and didn't make eye contact. They'd driven north for 40 minutes, leaving the city behind for rolling hills and iron gates that opened without anyone touching them. The driveway alone was longer than her old street. When the house came into view, Becca's stomach dropped. It was massive, all glass and stone and sharp angles, perched on a hillside like a predator surveying its territory. Everything about it screamed money and control. Not a single leaf out of place in the manicured gardens. Not a crack in the marble steps. Valentino met her at the front door. He'd traded his suit for dark jeans and a black Henley. But he still looked dangerous. Maybe more so. The casual clothes made the tattoos on his forearms visible, serpentine designs that crawled toward his wrists. You came, he said. I gave you my word. Becca adjusted the duffel bag on her shoulder. Everything she owned fit into 2 bags. The rest she'd left behind in her apartment, which already felt like a memory. Good. Follow me. He led her through a foyer with ceilings so high her footsteps echoed. The interior was exactly what she'd expected. White marble floors, modern art that probably cost more than a car, furniture that looked like it had never been sat on. No family photos, no clutter, no warmth. They climbed a curved staircase to the 2nd floor. The hallway stretched in both directions, lined with closed doors. Valentino stopped at one near the end. This is your room. Private bathroom, closet. Anything you need, tell Maria. She runs the household staff. Becca nodded, but her attention was already on the door across the hall. It was slightly ajar, and she could see a sliver of pale pink wall. Valentino noticed. That's theirs. I'll show you. He pushed the door open, and Becca's heart sank. The room was enormous and utterly soulless. 3 identical beds arranged in perfect symmetry, each with white linens tucked so tight they could bounce a coin. 3 matching dressers, 3 small desks with nothing on them. The walls were a soft blush pink, but it was the only color in the entire space. No posters, no drawings, no stuffed animals or books or toys. It looked like a hospital room, trying to pretend it wasn't. The triplets were sitting on their respective beds, hands folded in their laps, staring at nothing. They wore matching white nightgowns, their hair braided identically. They didn't look up when Becca entered. "This is where they sleep?" Becca asked, her voice tight. "Yes. The interior designer said children need structure, and this isn't structure. This is a cage." She walked to the nearest bed and ran her hand over the comforter. It was cold to the touch. "Where are their toys? They don't play with toys. Because they don't have any." Valentino's jaw tightened. "They used to. After the incident, they stopped. They'd just sit and stare at them. So I had them removed." Becca turned to face him. "That's exactly when they needed them most. Children process trauma through play. You took away their language. I took away the reminders. You took away their childhood." Becca looked back at the girls. They still hadn't moved. "I need you to leave." "Excuse me?" "Leave. I need to be alone with them. You hovering isn't going to help." For a moment, she thought he might refuse. But then he nodded stiffly and walked out, closing the door behind him. Becca waited until his footsteps faded. Then she sat on the floor in the center of the room, cross-legged, and waited. 5 minutes passed. 10. The girls didn't move, but Becca could feel them watching her in their peripheral vision. "My name is Becca," she said quietly. "I'm not here to fix you. I'm here to listen." No response. "I'm also here to make a mess," she continued, "because I think this room is way too clean, don't you?" Luna's finger twitched. Just barely. Becca stood and walked to the door, opening it wide. Valentino was in the hallway, arms crossed. "I need paint," Becca said. "Finger paints, all the colors. And I need pudding, whipped cream and chocolate syrup, and flour." "Why?" "Because your daughters need to remember how to make a mess." She held his gaze. "Trust me, or this doesn't work." He studied her for a long moment, then pulled out his phone and typed rapidly. "Done. Maria will bring it up in 20 minutes." When the supplies arrived, Becca spread a plastic sheet across the floor and opened every container. She dipped her hands in red paint and pressed them to the plastic. Then blue, then yellow. She mixed pudding with whipped cream and drew spirals. She made handprints and footprints and didn't care that paint was getting on her jeans. And slowly, like flowers turning toward the sun, the triplets slid off their beds. Luna approached first, her bare feet hesitant on the plastic. She stared at the paint, then at Becca. Becca held out her hand, palm covered in green. "It's okay, it washes off." Luna's small hand touched the paint. Her eyes widened. Then, for the first time since Becca had met her, Luna smiled. It was tiny, barely there. But it was real. Stella and Nova joined her. Within minutes, all 3 girls were covered in paint and pudding, their white nightgowns ruined, their perfect braids coming loose, and they were laughing. Not words, but sound. Pure, unfiltered joy. Becca looked up to see Valentino standing in the doorway, frozen. He was staring at his daughters like he was seeing ghosts. "They're laughing," he whispered. "Yes," Becca said. "They are." The laughter died so quickly that Becca thought she'd imagined it. 1 second, The triplets were giggling, smearing chocolate pudding across the plastic sheet in chaotic spirals. The next, they were statues, hands frozen mid-motion, eyes wide and locked on the doorway. Becca turned. A man stood in the threshold, tall and lean with the same sharp features as Valentino, but somehow colder. He wore an expensive navy suit, tailored perfectly, and his dark hair was slicked back with product that caught the light. A gold watch glinted at his wrist, the kind that cost more than most people's cars. But it was his smile that made Becca's skin crawl. It was too smooth, too practiced, like a mask he'd worn so long it had fused to his face. "Well," the man said, his voice carrying an urbane warmth that didn't reach his eyes. "Looks like someone's been having fun." Valentino stepped between the man and the girls. "Lorenzo, I didn't know you were coming by. I texted. You didn't answer." Lorenzo's gaze slid past his brother to Becca. "And who's this? New staff?" "The girl's governess, Becca Angelo." Valentino's tone was clipped. "Becca, this is my brother, Lorenzo De Luca, my underboss." Lorenzo extended his hand, stepping forward. His shoes made a distinct sound on the hardwood floor just outside the plastic sheet. A measured click-click that was too precise, too deliberate. The triplets flinched in perfect unison. Becca noticed immediately. Their breathing had synchronized, 3 chests rising and falling in identical rhythm. Their eyes weren't on Lorenzo's face. They were locked on his feet. She stood slowly, positioning herself between Lorenzo and the girls. She didn't shake his hand. "Nice to meet you," she said, her voice neutral. Lorenzo's smile tightened. He lowered his hand. "Governess, how modern. I thought we'd agreed on boarding school, Fratellino." "We didn't agree on anything," Valentino said. "And they're not going anywhere. They're 6 years old and they don't speak. They need professional help, not—" Lorenzo gestured at the paint-covered plastic, his lip curling slightly. "Art therapy. They spoke 2 days ago." Lorenzo's expression shifted. Just for a moment, something flickered behind his eyes. Surprise, and something else. Something darker. "Did they?" He looked at the girls, his head tilting. "What did they say?" "1 word, but it's progress. 1 word in 2 years." Lorenzo laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Dante, be realistic. These girls are a liability. The family needs strength right now, not—" "Careful." Valentino's voice dropped to something lethal. "That's my daughters you're talking about." The air in the room changed. Becca could feel the tension coiling like a spring about to snap. Lorenzo raised his hands in mock surrender. "I'm just looking out for the family. You know that." He glanced at Becca. "No offense to your new hire, but trauma like theirs doesn't just go away because someone plays in the mud with them." "It's pudding," Becca said flatly. Lorenzo blinked. "What? Pudding? Not mud. And sensory play is a proven therapeutic technique for processing trauma in children. Is that so?" Lorenzo's smile returned, sharper now. He took a step closer, his shoes clicking against the floor again. All 3 girls jerked backward simultaneously, their hands clutching at each other. Becca's pulse spiked. She'd seen fear responses before, but this was something else. This was recognition. The girls weren't just afraid of Lorenzo. They knew him, knew the sound of his approach. "I think it's time for you to go," Becca said, her voice steady, despite the adrenaline flooding her system. Lorenzo's eyebrows rose. "Excuse me?" "The girls need consistency and calm. You're disrupting their session." She held his gaze. "So unless you have business with Mr. De Luca that can't wait, I'm asking you to leave." For a moment, Lorenzo just stared at her. Then he laughed, a genuine sound this time, though it carried an edge like broken glass. "She's got fire, this one. Where did you find her, Dante?" "Craigslist." "A restaurant," Valentino said. "Now get out." Lorenzo's smile vanished. He looked at his brother, and Becca saw something pass between them. An old argument. A wound that had never healed. "Fine. But we need to talk, tonight, about the Moretti situation." Lorenzo adjusted his cufflinks, a gesture that seemed designed to draw attention to his hands, to the snake tattoo that coiled around his right wrist, its head resting on the back of his hand. The girls made a sound, all three of them. A small, sharp intake of breath. Becca saw it then. Stella was staring at the tattoo like it was a loaded gun. Lorenzo noticed. His expression shifted into something that might have been sympathy if it weren't so calculated. Poor things. Still so jumpy. He looked at Valentino. "You sure you want them here? The estate isn't exactly child-proof these days." "They're safe here." "Are they?" Lorenzo's gaze lingered on the girls for a beat too long. "I hope you're right, Fratellino." He turned and walked away, his shoes clicking against the hardwood in that same measured rhythm. The sound faded down the hallway, down the stairs, until finally a door closed somewhere far below. Only then did the triplets breathe normally again. Becca knelt beside them, her mind racing. "Hey, it's okay. He's gone." But the girls weren't looking at her. They were looking at the doorway, their small hands still clutched together in a knot of fingers and fear. Luna's lips moved. No sound came out, but Becca read the word on her mouth. Snake. Valentino saw it too. His face went pale. "Becca, we need to talk. Now." Becca couldn't sleep. The guest room was too quiet, too perfect, like sleeping in a showroom. She'd been lying awake for 2 hours, staring at the ceiling and replaying Lorenzo's visit in her mind. The way the girls had frozen, the way they'd stared at his shoes, his tattoo, like they were staring at the barrel of a gun. At 11:43, she heard it. Tap, 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 tap. The sound was faint, rhythmic, coming from across the hall. Becca threw off the covers and padded to her door, opening it just enough to peer out. The hallway was dark, except for a sliver of light beneath the triplets' door. She crossed the hall silently and eased the door open. The girls were in their beds, but they weren't sleeping. They were sitting upright, their small hands moving in synchronized patterns against their wooden bed frames. Tap, 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 tap. It wasn't random. Becca's breath caught as she watched. Each girl was tapping a different rhythm, but they were all connected, layered over each other like a conversation in code. Luna tapped twice, paused, then 3 times. Stella answered with a single tap, then 2 quick ones. Nova completed the sequence with 4 measured beats. Then they started again. The same pattern, precise, deliberate. Becca stepped into the room. "Hey, what are you doing?" The tapping stopped instantly. 3 sets of dark eyes turned toward her, wide and startled. "It's okay," Becca said softly, raising her hands. "I'm not mad. I just want to understand." She moved to Luna's bed and sat on the edge, careful not to crowd her. Up close, she could see the concentration on the girl's face, the intelligence burning behind the silence. "Can you show me?" Becca asked. Luna looked at her sisters. Some invisible communication passed between them. Then, slowly, Luna lifted her hand and tapped the bed frame. Tap, 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 tap. Becca watched, her mind working. It wasn't Morse code. The intervals were too irregular, but it was definitely intentional, a system they'd created. "Is it a language?" she asked. Nova nodded, just barely. Becca's pulse quickened. This was it. This was how they'd been communicating. not with words, but with patterns, with rhythm and repetition. "What are you saying?" she asked gently. Stella reached for the nightstand and pulled out a small pad of paper and a pencil. Her movements were careful, practiced. She began to draw. First 3 circles, small and evenly spaced. Then lines connecting them. Not random lines, coordinates, a grid. Becca's stomach dropped as she recognized what she was seeing. "You're mapping the house." The girls nodded in unison. Stella kept drawing. She added rectangles for rooms, marked doorways, traced hallways. Her tiny hand moved with eerie precision, creating a blueprint from memory. Luna and Nova watched, occasionally tapping corrections that Stella incorporated without question. "Why are you mapping the house?" Becca asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer. Stella's pencil stopped. She looked at her sisters again. The silent conversation happened faster this time. Some agreement reached in the space between heartbeats. Then Luna pointed to a specific rectangle on the map. A room on the first floor. She tapped it 3 times, hard enough to tear the paper slightly. "What's in that room?" Becca whispered. Nova reached for the pencil and drew something in the margin of the paper. It was crude, but unmistakable. A snake, its body coiled, its head raised, fangs visible. The same snake tattooed on Lorenzo's wrist. Becca's blood went cold. "The snake! You're afraid of the snake!" All 3 girls nodded. "Is it Lorenzo? Are you afraid of Lorenzo?" Another nod. Slower this time. Heavier. Becca's mind was racing. The girls had witnessed their mother's murder 2 years ago. They'd stopped speaking that night, and now they were mapping the house, tracking movements, creating escape routes. "Who are you hiding from?" she asked, even though she already knew. Stella took the pencil again. She drew another snake, this one bigger, more detailed. She added the outline of a hand, a wrist, the exact placement of Lorenzo's tattoo. Then, in shaky letters, she wrote a single word. "Uncle." Becca's hands were trembling. "Does your father know? Does Valentino know you're afraid of Lorenzo?" 3 heads shook no. "Why not? Why haven't you told him?" Luna's small hand reached out and touched Becca's wrist. Her fingers moved in a deliberate pattern. Tap, 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 tap. Becca didn't understand the code, but she understood the message in Luna's eyes. Because we don't know who to trust. The door opened behind her. Becca spun to find Valentino standing in the threshold, his face illuminated by the hallway light. He was in sweatpants and a t-shirt, hair disheveled, and he looked exhausted. "What's going on?" he asked. "I heard voices." Becca stood slowly, positioning herself between him and the girls. Her mind was calculating risks, weighing options. If she told him what she'd discovered, what would he do? Would he confront Lorenzo? Would that put the girls in more danger? But if she didn't tell him, and something happened? "We need to talk," Becca said quietly. "Somewhere they can't hear." Valentino's eyes narrowed. He looked past her to his daughters, who had gone completely still, their hands frozen on the bed frames. "Now," Becca added. He studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. "My office." 5 minutes. When he left, Becca turned back to the triplets. They were watching her with those wide, haunted eyes, waiting to see if she'd break their trust. "I'm going to help you," she whispered. "I promise. But I need you to trust me." "Can you do that?" Luna picked up the paper with the snake drawing and held it out to Becca. An offering, a confession. Becca took it, folding it carefully and tucking it into her pocket. "Get some sleep," she said softly. "I've got this." But as she walked to Valentino's office, the paper burning against her hip, She wondered if that was a promise she could actually keep. Valentino's office was all dark wood and leather, the kind of room designed for making decisions that ruined lives. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey without asking if she wanted one, then slid one across the desk toward her. "Talk," he said. Becca pulled the drawing from her pocket and placed it on the desk between them. "Your daughters are afraid of your brother." Valentino stared at the crude snake for a long moment. His knuckles went white around his glass. "Why?" "I don't know yet. But they've been mapping the house, tracking movements. They're planning escape routes." She met his eyes. "Children don't do that unless they're in danger." "Lorenzo wouldn't—" He stopped, shook his head. "He's family. So were the men who killed their mother. Or have you forgotten that?" The glass shattered in his hand. Becca didn't flinch. She watched him sweep the shards into a napkin, watched the blood well up on his palm, watched him ignore it completely. "I'll handle this," he said finally. "How?" "That's not your concern." "It is if it affects those girls." Valentino looked up, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw genuine fear in his eyes. "If you're right about Lorenzo, if he's involved in what happened to Elena, then we're already in the middle of a war. And wars require strategy. Wars require keeping children safe. That's what I'm doing." He wrapped his hand in the napkin. "There's a gala tomorrow night, fundraiser for the mayor's re-election campaign. Every family in New York will be there. I have to attend, and I'm bringing the girls." "That's insane. You just said—" "I said we're at war, which means I need to show strength. I need the other families to see that my house is in order, that my daughters are thriving. If I cancel, if I hide them, Lorenzo wins." He leaned forward. "You're coming too, as their nanny. I'm not a prop in your power play. You're whatever I need you to be. That was the deal." Becca wanted to argue, but he was right. She'd signed up for this, and walking away now meant abandoning 3 little girls who'd finally started to trust her. "Fine," she said, "but the girls don't leave my sight. Not for a second." The Plaza Hotel ballroom glittered like a dragon's hoard. Crystal chandeliers, champagne fountains, women in gowns that cost more than Becca's old car. The air smelled like expensive perfume and older money. Becca stood near the wall in a simple black dress that Valentino had sent to her room that morning. It fit perfectly, which somehow made her feel more uncomfortable. The triplets flanked her in matching burgundy velvet dresses, their hair in elaborate braids courtesy of Maria. They looked beautiful. They looked terrified. Becca kept one hand on Luna's shoulder, feeling the rapid flutter of the girl's pulse beneath the fabric. Across the room, Valentino worked the crowd with practiced ease, shaking hands, laughing at jokes that probably weren't funny, playing the role of legitimate businessman. Lorenzo appeared at his elbow like a shadow, equally polished, equally dangerous. "Breathe," Becca whispered to the girls. "I'm right here." The evening crawled by in a haze of forced smiles and careful conversations. Becca deflected questions from curious socialites about the poor De Luca girls with practiced politeness. The triplets stayed silent, their hands linked together in a chain. Then Lorenzo started moving toward them. Becca's spine went rigid. She watched him cross the ballroom, his path deliberate, his smile fixed. He had 2 men with him, security she didn't recognize. "Miss Angelo," Lorenzo said smoothly when he reached them. "The girls look lovely. Dante asked me to bring them backstage for a moment. Photo opportunity with the mayor." It was a lie. Becca could see it in the way his eyes didn't quite meet hers, in the tension in his shoulders. "Mr. De Luca didn't mention that to me," she said carefully. Last-minute decision. You understand how these things work. He reached for Stella's hand. "Come on, sweetheart. Uncle Lorenzo will—" Stella screamed. The sound ripped through the ballroom like a gunshot. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. And then Nova and Luna joined her. 3 voices rising in perfect, terrible harmony. Lorenzo jerked back, his face going pale. "What the—" "Don't touch them," Becca said, her voice cutting through the chaos. She pulled the girls behind her, making her body a shield. "Don't you ever touch them." People were staring now. Phones were coming out. Becca could see Valentino pushing through the crowd, his face a mask of fury and confusion. Lorenzo's mask had slipped. For just a second, Becca saw raw hatred flash across his features. "You stupid bitch! Do you have any idea what you just— Is there a problem here?" Valentino's voice was ice. Lorenzo smoothed his expression back into place. "Your nanny is hysterical. I was simply following your instructions to—" "I gave no such instructions." Valentino looked at Becca. "Take the girls. Back door. Cars waiting." Becca didn't need to be told twice. She scooped up Nova, grabbed Luna and Stella's hands, and moved toward the service exit. Behind her, she could hear Lorenzo's voice rising, Valentino's dropping to something lethal. The girls were still crying, their bodies shaking with sobs they'd kept locked inside for 2 years. "You did so good," Becca whispered as they burst into the night air. "You were so brave." The Mercedes was already running. Becca bundled the girls inside and climbed in after them, her heart hammering. Through the tinted windows, she saw Valentino emerge from the hotel. His jaw was set, his hands clenched into fists. He looked like a man about to start a war. And maybe, Becca thought as the car pulled away, that was exactly what was about to happen. The ride back to the estate was silent, except for the girls' hiccuping breaths as they came down from their panic. Becca held all 3 of them, their small bodies pressed against hers, their tears soaking through her dress. She didn't speak, didn't try to soothe them with empty promises. She just held on. When they arrived, Valentino was already there. His car must have taken a different route, faster, more reckless. He was waiting in the foyer, his bow tie undone, his jacket gone. He looked like a man barely holding himself together. "Get them to bed," he said to Becca. His voice was flat, dangerous. "Valentino, now." Becca ushered the girls upstairs, helped them out of their velvet dresses, washed the tear-streaked makeup from their faces. They clung to her the entire time, their small hands fisted in her clothes like she might disappear if they let go. "It's okay," she whispered as she tucked them into bed. "You're safe. I promise." But the words felt hollow. She didn't know if they were safe, didn't know if any of them were. When she came back downstairs, Valentino was in his office, standing at the window with his back to the door. A fresh glass of whiskey sat untouched on his desk. "You humiliated me tonight," he said, without turning around. "I kept your daughters safe. By causing a scene in front of every crime family in New York. By making it look like I can't control my own household." He spun to face her, and his eyes were blazing. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I stopped Lorenzo from taking them. That's what I did." "He's my underboss, my brother. He wouldn't what?" Becca pulled the drawing from her pocket and slapped it on his desk. "Wouldn't terrify 3 little girls. Wouldn't make them so afraid they've spent 2 years mapping escape routes?" Valentino stared at the snake. His jaw worked, but no words came out. "Your daughters didn't stop speaking because of trauma," Becca continued, her voice shaking. "They stopped because they didn't know who was safe. They saw their mother murdered, and then they saw that." She pointed at the snake. "That tattoo. on someone they were supposed to trust. You're saying Lorenzo killed Elena. I'm saying your daughters think he did, and children don't lie about fear. Valentino's hands were shaking. He braced them on the desk, his head dropping. He's my brother. Then prove me wrong. Check the security logs from 2 years ago. You said men broke into your home. How did they get past your security? How did they know exactly when Eleanor would be alone with the girls? It was a coordinated attack. They had inside information. From who? The question hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Valentino straightened slowly. He moved to his computer, fingers flying across the keyboard. Becca watched as screen after screen of data populated. Security footage, access logs, communication records. The breach happened at 9:43 p.m., Valentino muttered, more to himself than to her. South entrance. The system shows it was overridden with an administrative code. Who has those codes? Me, my head of security. And... He stopped. His face went white. Lorenzo. Becca's stomach dropped. When was the last time he used his code? Valentino's fingers moved, clicked. The timestamp appeared on screen. 9:41 p.m. 2 minutes before the breach. No, Valentino whispered. No, there has to be an explanation. Maybe he was checking the system. Maybe... Look at the location. Becca leaned over his shoulder, pointing at the screen. He wasn't here. He wasn't at the estate. He was logged in remotely. Valentino pulled up another file. Security footage from that night. Grainy, dark, but clear enough. 3 men in masks moving through the house. And there, reflected in a mirror in the background, a 4th figure. Watching. Directing. The figure lifted his hand, speaking into a phone. The snake tattoo was clearly visible on his wrist. Valentino made a sound like he'd been gutted. He staggered back from the desk, one hand pressed to his chest. Dante. Lorenzo's voice came from the doorway. They both spun. Lorenzo stood there with 4 men behind him. All armed. His smile was gone, replaced by something cold and tired. I was hoping we could do this the easy way, Lorenzo said, but you always were too sentimental about those girls. Valentino's hand moved toward his waistband, but Lorenzo's men already had their weapons drawn. Don't, Lorenzo said softly. You're outnumbered, outgunned, and I've already sealed the estate. No one gets in. No one gets out. You killed Elena, Valentino said, his voice raw. Your own sister-in-law, the mother of my children. I removed an obstacle. Elena was making you weak, making you soft, just like those daughters are now. Lorenzo stepped into the room. This family needs strength, Dante. And you stopped providing it the day you decided to play house. Becca's mind was racing. The girls were upstairs, alone, unprotected. If Lorenzo had sealed the estate, if he'd brought men inside, what do you want? Valentino asked. Your resignation. You step down, name me head of the family, and I'll let you live. You and your little nanny can take the girls somewhere far away and play pretend family all you want. Lorenzo's eyes shifted to Becca. Or you can refuse, and I'll finish what I started 2 years ago. Choice is yours. Becca saw Valentino's hand move, saw him calculating odds, measuring distances. Don't be stupid, brother, Lorenzo said. You can't win this. Maybe not, Valentino replied, but I can make sure you don't either. The lights went out. The entire house plunged into darkness, and in that darkness, Becca heard 3 things simultaneously. Gunfire, Valentino shouting her name, and from somewhere upstairs, 3 small voices screaming in perfect unison. A warning. A code. The enemy was already inside. The gunfire was deafening in the darkness. Becca dropped to the floor as bullets punched through the office walls, sending splinters of wood and plaster raining down. She couldn't see anything, could only hear Valentino returning fire, the muzzle flashes lighting the room in strobing bursts. "Becca!" Valentino's hand found her arm, yanked her toward the wall. "The girls! We have to get to them!" They crawled through the darkness, staying low. Behind them, Lorenzo was shouting orders, his men flooding into the office. Valentino fired twice more, buying them seconds. Then they were through a hidden door in the paneling that Becca hadn't even known existed. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing the narrow servants' corridor in red. They ran. "Where are we going?" Becca gasped. "The hangar. There's a helicopter." Valentino's voice was strained. "We get the girls and we go." They burst into the triplets' room. The girls were huddled together on Luna's bed, their eyes wide in the crimson light. When they saw Valentino and Becca, they scrambled towards them. "Daddy," Stella whispered. The word was so small, so fragile. Valentino scooped up Nova, while Becca grabbed Luna and Stella. "We're leaving, right now. Stay quiet." They moved through the house like ghosts, using back staircases and hidden passages that Valentino knew by heart. Becca could hear Lorenzo's men spreading through the estate, their boots heavy on marble floors, their radios crackling. The side exit led to the garage. Valentino's hand was on the door handle when they heard voices on the other side. "Blocked," he hissed. "Hangar. We go on foot." They slipped out through the conservatory, the glass walls reflecting their desperate flight. The hangar was 300 yards across the grounds, a low building near the tree line. It felt like miles. They were halfway there when the spotlights hit them. "Run!" Valentino shouted. Becca's legs burned as she sprinted across the manicured lawn, Luna and Stella's hands locked in hers. Behind them, men were pouring out of the house. Ahead, the hangar door was open, the helicopter visible inside. They made it with seconds to spare. Valentino slammed the hangar door and threw the manual lock, buying them maybe a minute. "Get them in," he said, moving to the pilot's seat. Becca was strapping the girls into the back when the hangar door exploded inward. Lorenzo walked through the smoke and twisted metal like something out of a nightmare. His suit was torn, blood on his face from a graze wound. 4 of his men flanked him, weapons raised. "Going somewhere?" Lorenzo asked. Valentino stepped out of the helicopter, his gun trained on his brother. "Let them go, Lorenzo. This is between us." "No, brother. This is about family, about legacy." Lorenzo's weapon was steady. "You were supposed to build an empire. Instead, you built a dollhouse. I built a life. You built a weakness." Lorenzo's eyes flicked to the girls. "And weaknesses get cut out." Becca saw it happening in slow motion, saw Lorenzo's finger tighten on the trigger, saw the barrel shift slightly, aiming not at Valentino, but at the helicopter. At the girls. Her hand found the nearest object on the workbench beside her. A ceramic plate, probably left by a mechanic during a lunch break. The same kind of plate from the Onyx room. Time crystallized. She thought of that first night, of the balsamic glaze, of 3 dots connected into a triangle, of the word that had changed everything, connected. Becca threw the plate with everything she had. It spun through the air, catching the light, and shattered against Lorenzo's temple. His shot went wild, sparking off the hangar wall, and the triplets screamed, not in fear this time, in perfect synchronized command. "Down!" The word exploded from 3 small bodies with more force than seemed possible. It wasn't a cry. It was an order, given with absolute certainty. Valentino dropped like he'd been shot. Lorenzo's second shot passed through empty air where his brother's head had been a heartbeat before. And Valentino fired from the ground. 3 shots, center mass. Lorenzo staggered backward, his weapon clattering to the concrete. His men raised their guns, But another voice cut through the chaos. "Federal agents! Weapons down!" The hangar flooded with bodies in tactical gear, FBI logos stark on their vests. Lorenzo's men dropped their weapons, hands raised. But Lorenzo was still standing, blood spreading across his shirt, his eyes locked on Valentino with something like pride. "You finally grew teeth, little brother," he rasped. Then he collapsed. Valentino was on his feet, moving toward Becca and the girls. An FBI agent tried to stop him, but he pushed past. "Are you hurt?" His hands moved over the triplets, checking for injuries. "Tell me you're okay." "We're okay, Daddy," Luna said. Her voice was soft but clear. "Real." Stella nodded. "We saved you." Nova touched Valentino's face. "We talked." Valentino pulled all three of them against his chest, his body shaking. When he looked up at Becca, his eyes were wet. "You threw a plate," he said, his voice breaking between a laugh and a sob. "It worked the first time," Becca replied. An FBI agent approached, a woman with sharp eyes and a badge clipped to her belt. "Mr. De Luca, we've been monitoring Lorenzo for 6 months, his communications, his movements. When we intercepted his plan tonight, we moved in." "You used us as bait," Valentino said flatly. "We saved your life." The agent looked at the girls. "And theirs. Lorenzo was planning to eliminate all of you tonight." Valentino stood slowly, the girls still clinging to him. "What happens now?" "Now? You answer some questions. You make some choices." The agent's expression softened slightly. "And you figure out what kind of man you want to be when this is over." Valentino looked down at his daughters, at Becca, who'd thrown herself into danger for 3 children who weren't hers, at the blood on his hands and the ruins of his brother's betrayal. "I already know," he said quietly. The FBI kept them for 6 hours. Questions in sterile rooms, under fluorescent lights that made everyone look like ghosts. Valentino answered everything with the kind of precision that came from years of controlling narratives. Yes, his brother had betrayed him. Yes, he'd suspected criminal activity within his organization. No, he hadn't known the extent of it. The agent, Agent Reeves, watched him with eyes that had seen too many lies to believe most truths. "You're walking a very thin line, Mr. De Luca," she said finally. "We have enough on Lorenzo to close multiple investigations, but your name is all over those same files. Then charge me." "We could." Reeves leaned back in her chair. "Or you could cooperate, provide testimony, help us dismantle what's left of Lorenzo's network. In exchange for immunity, protection for your family, a chance to walk away from this life instead of spending the next 20 years in a cell." Valentino looked through the one-way mirror where Becca sat with the girls, reading them a story from a children's book someone had found. Luna was curled against her side. Stella had fallen asleep with her head in Becca's lap. Nova was fighting to keep her eyes open, losing. "What do I have to do?" he asked. 3 weeks later, the De Luca estate was swarming with federal agents executing search warrants and accountants seizing assets. Valentino stood in his bedroom, the one he'd shared with Eleanor before she died, and packed a single suitcase. Not the expensive suits, not the silk ties or the Italian shoes, jeans, t-shirts, a leather jacket his father had given him before the old man went to prison. Things a person wore when they were just a person. Becca appeared in the doorway. "The girls are in the car. They wanted to bring the finger paints." "All of them?" "Every single container, plus the paper, the plastic sheets, and what I'm pretty sure is a yogurt cup they're using as a brush holder." Valentino smiled. It felt strange on his face. Unfamiliar. "Where are we going?" "You're asking me?" "You're the one who saved our lives with a plate." I figure you've earned some decision-making power. Becca crossed the room and took his hand. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere they can be loud. They found it in Vermont, a farmhouse on 20 acres with a barn that was half collapsed and a kitchen that needed gutting. The previous owners had been a retired couple who'd moved south for their health. The realtor had apologized for the condition. Valentino had bought it in cash, one of the few things the FBI had allowed him to keep. They spent 6 months renovating. Valentino learned how to use a table saw. Becca learned that she was terrible at plumbing, but excellent at tile work. The girls learned that dirt wasn't scary, that chickens were funny, and that their father couldn't cook to save his life. 1 year later, the kitchen was chaos incarnate. "That's my pancake," Nova shrieked, trying to stab Stella's hand with a fork. "You already ate 3, Stella shot back, holding the plate above her head. "Girls," Becca warned, flipping another batch on the griddle, "we have plenty. Nobody's going hungry." "But hers has more chocolate chips," Luna chimed in from the table. Valentino walked in from his morning run, sweaty and grinning. He'd put on weight, good weight, the kind that came from sleeping through the night and eating meals you didn't check for poison first. "What's the crisis?" he asked. "Pancake inequality," Becca said, not looking up. "Also, your daughters are savages." "Our daughters," he corrected, kissing the back of her neck. The ring on her finger caught the morning light. They'd gotten married 2 months ago at the courthouse, with the girls as witnesses, and a judge who'd made terrible jokes about the bride and groom, both keeping their last names. "Our daughters are savages," Becca amended. Nova noticed him and launched herself across the kitchen. "Daddy, tell Stella she has to share." "Tell Nova she's being greedy," Stella countered. "Tell them both that I should get the extra pancakes, because I'm the oldest," Luna added with impeccable logic. Valentino caught Nova mid-flight and spun her around. "I think you're all going to share equally, or nobody gets chocolate chips tomorrow." The simultaneous gasp of horror was deeply satisfying. He set Nova down and moved to the stove, wrapping his arms around Becca's waist as she worked. "How's the morning been?" "Loud," she said. "Chaotic. Perfect." Through the window, he could see the barn they'd converted into offices. The sign out front read, "Sentinel Security Consulting," in simple black letters. Legitimate work. Background checks. Private security for executives. Cybersecurity consulting. Boring. Legal and entirely his. His phone buzzed. A text from his new business partner, a former FBI agent named Marcus, who'd retired to start his own firm and had taken a chance on Valentino when most people wouldn't. "Client meeting moved to 2 p.m. Don't be late." "I have to go into town this afternoon," Valentino said. "The Henderson contract?" "Yeah, should be straightforward." "Nothing with you is straightforward," Becca said, but she was smiling. Stella appeared at his elbow. "Daddy, can we come?" "To a business meeting?" "We'll be good. We'll be so quiet." "You 3? "Quiet?" Valentino raised an eyebrow. "I don't believe it for a second." Luna and Nova rushed over, forming their devastating triple-pronged attack. "Please, we want to see your office." Valentino looked at Becca. She shrugged. "They've been practicing their professional behavior." "That's terrifying." "Deeply." He crouched down to the girl's level. "Okay, but you have to promise. No running, no yelling, and absolutely no rearranging Mr. Henderson's office." "We only did that once," Nova protested. "Once was enough." They squealed and ran to get their shoes, a thundering herd of enthusiasm and mismatched socks. Becca plated the pancakes, calling the girls back to the table. They came reluctantly, arguing about who got to sit where, whose fork was whose, whether syrup should go on pancakes or beside them. Valentino watched them from the doorway, these three small humans who'd stopped speaking for 2 years, and now couldn't seem to stop, who'd saved his life by finding their voices at exactly the right moment. "You good?" Becker asked softly. He thought about Lorenzo, dying in a federal detention center from complications of his injuries, about the empire he'd walked away from, about the man he used to be, who'd ruled through fear and violence and money. That man was gone. In his place was someone softer, someone who knew how to make breakfast, who got paint on his jeans, who'd learned that the most powerful thing in the world wasn't a gun or a threat. It was 3 little girls saying, "I love you, Daddy," before bed. "Yeah," Valentino said, pulling Becker close. "I'm good." From the table came another shriek. "Nova put syrup in my juice. It was an accident. You're holding the bottle," Becker sighed. "And this is our life now." "Loudest life I've ever lived," Valentino said. He wouldn't trade it for anything,